I want to talk to you about the lymph system here for a moment before we get into the Twitter questions, because I interviewed Dr. Ron Hoffman, and he told me that MDs generally don't get a lot of training about the lymph, and it seems like this is kind of a key player in this whole detox process. I'm not talking about just your running, but generally the lymph is a key player here. How much education are MDs getting in the lymph, and how important player is it in detoxification?
I don't believe I received any education in medical school on lymphatic drainage, and I learned most of my knowledge about this by my naturopathic colleagues and friends. They're the ones that sort of brought me up to date on what it means. Yeah, it was actually kind of nebulous at first. I didn't even understand like what they were talking about, but it's really important. I mean, that's really our storage organ. It's like, of course, fat is a place to store toxins, but so is the space in between all the cells. And when our body is not when we sort of get too much exposure and we are no longer able to get the toxins out of our system the way that we're supposed to, these toxins have to go someplace. And while some people are lucky enough to store it in fat where they don't get symptoms, if it goes into the interstitial space where the cells are not able to manage it and it won't go into circulation for liver and kidney to get rid of it, then we really have a big problem. And the people with interstitial spacing problems usually have fluid retention, that like weight loss that they just can't get rid of, and a lot of inflammation. So,
Andrea, what do you do with lymph in your program?
We definitely talk about lymph in the immune intensive. We like to look at breathing techniques, rebounding. What else comes to mind? I can call on my students and give them quizzes.
Live quiz. You didn't know there'd be a test, otherwise you wouldn't have had the detox shake outside, which had vodka in it. All right, so we're going to just have a couple of questions here from Twitter, and then audience, put your hand up if you want to ask a question. I'll send the mic over to you. Dr. Ellie Campbell has a question, and she's from Atlanta. She runs our Atlanta meetup, which is a big, consistent meetup. I'm a big fan of her. She says about detox during pregnancy, too many pregnant mums with overwhelming nausea is, if toxic and pregnant, how do you help people? And I'll direct that maybe to Jeff first, and then I'm sure Penelope, you may have an impact, a question about this, because didn't you give your TED talk while you were pregnant?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Pregnant woman to ever give a TED talk.
Really? Okay. There you go.
That's my claim.
Well, do you want to start? I mean, you've probably talked to people about this. Okay, Jeff, you want to start?
Obviously, our first rule is that we don't want to detoxify a person while they're pregnant, because a lot of those toxins are going to be mobilized and go into the fetus. The placenta is actually a very good detoxifying organ. So basically, what is not going out of the woman's body can go into the fetus. And so probably just the best way to start out with, and I'd love everybody else's opinion, but just making sure that the exhaust system's working, getting all the toxins out through the back end.
Okay. Andrea, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I've led a lot of cleanses and detoxes and always have pregnant women in them, and what we have to do is make sure everything's working functionally first. There isn't constipation, but also slow it down quite a bit. So I think it depends on what we mean by detox and cleanse, and I like to lead food-based detoxes and cleanses, so they're slow enough that there isn't a lot of toxic dumping, but of course supporting the body and all the detoxification organs.
Jeff, I like what you said there about using the word detox and that idea to just sort of trick people into lifestyle change, which isn't as sexy as maybe doing a detox. Is that something that you sort of consciously did, or have you just arrived that that's a good sort of energizing factor for people?
Well, I think just about everything I'm doing is tricking people into doing something. It's somehow they arrive in my across the desk from me, and they're like, I want to get here, and secretly I have to help them to get over here. So, which is exactly what you were saying, which I really appreciated. So.
Penelope, what are your thoughts? Pregnancy, detoxification? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'm sure you can imagine I could talk all night about this.
Well, give it a go.
But this is absolutely true. The idea that you are, in fact, carrying everything that's going to pass into this baby, and you want to be very careful about what you do have circulating. You don't want to release anything. So, for example, when you're pregnant, your body is basically searching for calcium. A lot of calcium gets leached and it releases lead. So making sure that you're not calcium deficient is really helpful. You don't want to deliberately go through that process and say, well, hey, this is actually the most perfect time to do that. Your baby will detoxify you. In fact, studies have shown that having a baby and breastfeeding leads to much less toxicity for the mother. Unfortunately, we know where it's going.
Yeah.
And so that
It's
is
not a net win.
no, not for anyone. I think, encouraging pregnant women to certainly look at their diet, to eat well. We know that there's been a great study out of Duke that shows that leafy green vegetables like spinach are really good in dealing with the effects of things like BPA, for example. So cleaning up diet, meeting toxicity where it comes from, and trying to rectify it there. Moving, pregnant women can move, they can exercise, they can be healthy, and they can support the process in that way. But, actively, aggressively detoxing, really, it's not the time to do it.
Interesting. Gabe, one of the things I think really put the Functional Forum on a good standing point in the beginning was I had an opportunity to speak to 1,000 doctors before I got into this, to start this. And I know in the last year you've spoken to probably 1,000 doctors being in the concierge program. How do the particularly I'd love to know your thoughts about how doctors who are sort of making the switch across from regular medicine to integrative medicine view this topic, and what are some of the opportunities for them to be able to use this as a way to sort of move into this space?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, detoxing and cleansing is one of these buzzwords. It's in every blog. It's in every, people are talking about it. So, the doctors that are first coming across and coming on board, a lot of times, they want to bring these into their center. What I really appreciated about it, and something people have seen us talk about here at the forum, is it's so much about building community and leveraging your time. So many skilled practitioners and doctors out there that could do great work, but aren't necessarily running their practice in a way that's going to make sense for them. So, like, what we're really passionate about is how can we help empower the doctors, the MDs, the naturopaths, the practitioners of today to leverage their time, because you're not just a doctor, you're a teacher, right? You're teaching people how to change their lifestyle. You're teaching people how to take care of themselves. And so the reason I'm saying all this is because a detox program is one of the best ways to start to integrate and implement that approach into your practice. A group cleanse or a group detox is great, not just because it leverages financially, but because you can incorporate your health coach, you can incorporate other members of your staff, you can get in front of a group of people and teach something, you can get the people coming into your office to know each other and to start talking to each other as support buddies. So it's a great way to introduce them to the concept of how you would want to run that type of scalable office, and you get great results like that, and it becomes a much more fun experience. I think something about, when we're all together at this event every month, it's a lot of fun. That's why people come back. It's not just to hear James talk or us talk or a few people. James thinks it's to hear him talk, but overall, it's a mix of everyone having a good time. So, the more you can create that at your office, the more you're going to have a community hub, and I think detoxing and cleansing is one of the smartest ways to do that.
That's a great point that you made there, that it's not, the detoxification, yes, is like improving the function of detoxification organs, but the majority of the leverage is not putting the toxins in the first place. And so that requires, again, that's not a medical thing, that's a community thing, that's a behavior change thing.
Right.
What are some of the ways that you're seeing that people are doing that out in the field at scale?
Well, it's a great point. So if I were to answer that question about pregnancy, I think, one of the basic things is women just avoiding all of these things, because obviously what they're putting in is going to the baby. So cleansing could be dangerous. And as a practitioner who is not a doctor, I always had to be extremely careful what I would do. So in that situation, it's always just about eliminating things. And then you're right, the next question is, okay, yeah, so I just eliminate everything that I use in my day-to-day lifestyle, just do that tomorrow. Like, no one could do that. And basically that's the biggest challenge. So when you have people working together and you've created a community, and it's not just you sitting with someone in one-on-one saying, here's your plan, here's what you have to do, see you in 2 months, but you actually have a group of people getting together who are supporting each other, and then it's like, hey, are you having trouble with this part of the program, or how are you doing, what are you using in place of your soap or whatever thing you were using that had chemicals, and everyone's helping each other with that. That's how they actually execute this plan. We have so many great plans, but the truth is the challenge is, how do you help someone when they leave your office to change their entire lifestyle? And it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen just because you think it's a good idea. It happens because they're motivated, and they also have a continuous day-to-day support of some kind, whether it's within the family or something you're providing in your center or a health coach, but we need to, or just a buddy, like, and I don't know if you've done this in your office this way, but just having other patients work together and just support each other. So I feel like building community around cleanses is a really smart approach.
And good timing coming up towards that. Andrea, you're training a lot of practitioners to do this, and coaches maybe, and other practitioners. How are you teaching them to change this this habit?
Change the habit of
Well,
toxicity.
or just whatever it takes. They're retoxifying themselves through all kinds of
Right.
things all the time, right?
Yeah, so the first module in my training is the digestive intensive, and we need those organs functioning properly so we can even get to the liver. So in the digestive intensive, we actually have the liver bonus, which tends to be a crowd favorite amongst my students because they're finally getting to understand the genetic polymorphisms and all these things that people are coming to us with. So I think it's that deeper understanding of what's going on in there, understanding from a coaching perspective how we can relate what we're seeing to what might be happening, and then how we actually turn around and work with the individual who's experiencing that.
Penelope, what are some of the ways that you have seen that you've been able to sort of get the word out to a lot of people in the right time and sort of scale the communication aspect of it? Apart from your TED Talk, which is awesome, again.
Well, I find that people are increasingly motivated to want to know about this, and I think social media has been a really important tool in the word getting out. I think what we probably all appreciate is that the internet is a weird and wonderful place, and there is a lot of weirdness. I'm sure there are many practitioners who get people turning up in their office going, "Well, I read this, and this is how you do a detox," and it's an amazing tool. I think that if we can get people to understand that as a functional practitioner, you are on board, you're looking at the studies, you're with the data, then they're more inclined to trust you. They're more inclined to interact on social media with their friends, within their communities. I have a great doctor. I mean, what I hear a lot of is my doctor has no idea what I'm talking about. And I hear that more than anything else. My doctor tells me I'm crazy. My child is really sick, and my doctor won't, and he doesn't know it, and he has 5 minutes for me, and blah, 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 blah. And I think that in terms of like, where am I seeing my work being sort of magnified out? It's when people feel like there's someone of authority that they can speak to that reinforces the instincts that they have that this isn't right. I'm not meant to be this sick. When I was growing up, kids weren't sick like this. Why is my kid so sick? Or my peers weren't always so ill. And I think that is a really important tool if we have the practitioners there to lead them.
Awesome. Okay, we'll take a few questions from the crowd here. I'll start with Martha Cortez, dentist. Dentists have been poisoning people for a while, so, good time for a question.
Agreed. Okay. So actually speaking about children, so I have 3 generations in the practice because I end up having the grandmothers bring the daughters, bring the children. They're preparing for pregnancy. And they go, "Oh, I'm going to be pregnant in 3 months." I go, "And you have mercury fillings in your mouth and you want me to detox your mercury fillings. 3 months is not enough."
No.
Not at all. And then they had the children when they had the mercury, so now the kids have a little ADD, a little autism, just a touch, just a spectrum. So now we're supposed to detox that generation. But meantime, they're not breathing very well. The adenoids are an issue. The lymph is a tissue. Their posture is overburdened. And then grandma's the one who's cleanest out of everybody, and grandpa, because they've been with the practice.
Absolutely.
So where do you start with, because the mother is the generation of 3 generations.
Yeah.
So where do you start?
That's a great question. I think you have to start with the children because they're still developing.
Their airway.
And their airways, I mean, the quality of breath is so important when you're growing up. I think, we focus a lot on pregnancy, of course. So much of your adult mechanisms are being laid down during that time. But during childhood, you still have a lot of developmental processing going on. So I think you really want to try and help that child because implications in childhood are felt in adulthood. I think empowering grandma and granddad to help mom and dad is really, really key, because mom and dad just, they are so stressed and they are like beyond, and then they're finding out, oh, you mean it's my mercury fillings that cause this? I mean, the kind of guilt that they have to deal with.
Or they took it out too soon.
Or they took it out too soon. So what I did wasn't good enough. I mean, I should have waited even more. Like, what more do I need to do? Like, how much more of a superwoman? I mean, it's a really heavy burden, and I feel like supporting them is really key.
Andrea, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would love to. I think that we have to look at where people have motivation and what the motivating factors are, because change is hard. And I think pregnancy is a brilliant time because people are motivated at that time. They're scared prior to, but that's happening more. I'm seeing people going in, and there's more education about the months or the year prior to conception. So because pregnancy is coming also with fertility issues, there is more preparation, and it's a great motivating time. I think it's a perfect way to target a population to have this important conversation.
I also think that if you have a woman of childbearing age, this is information that they should have, because a lot of people accidentally get pregnant, or you're on the other side of the fence where you've put it off for so long and then suddenly the alarm is going and it's like, I want to have a baby tomorrow. And I think if you're already thinking about it, just so you know, you might want to start thinking about these things. There might be little things that they can do, even though they're not necessarily thinking they want to get pregnant tomorrow.
Good stuff. Yeah, I'm loving the group of different types of practitioners in here. We've got dentists asking questions. Dr. Datner, holistic dermatologist.
Thank you. I think one of the great things that may come out of this work is getting the word around. One of the things I had the privilege to do was write an article on breastfeeding and eczema. And as a result, I got to review a number of articles in the medical literature that were about to come out, some of which I found horrific, and fought with tooth and nail. And the basic finding was that there was a lot of, in the early literature, there were small studies, and certainly a general feeling that if women breastfed, the children had less eczema and less allergies. But the later study, and the studies that were coming out since the past 5 years or so, were much bigger studies and showing just the opposite, were very mixed results, and only the most horrific eczema patients were protected by breastfeeding, and the rest of them, it was a very mixed bag. And I think what we have is a situation like you've all been discussing. Here we have probably leaky gut leading to toxicity, leading to autotoxicity from allergens from not only food that's not broken down completely, but also to toxins from the colon, which if you don't have that valve closed, you get backup, and people are really getting a huge blast. So I think it's really important to start trying to get the word out there that women have to start beforehand. You don't want an accidental pregnancy for financial, political, and relationship reasons. You really don't want an accidental pregnancy for detox reasons. And as a physician, as an MD, I don't even give supplements to women who are pregnant, because if anything goes wrong, now maybe you can get away with it as coaches, but as a physician, if anything goes wrong, you're going to get blamed, and you probably wind up in court. So from the standpoint of what makes sense, you know that some of those people who you detox are going to pull toxins out of privileged sites, like mercury out of the kidney and out of the liver, and or bones, and start floating that around. You don't really want that to happen. No. During pregnancy. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think this is terrific that you're all discussing this. I just wanted to add the other point about the fixing the gut, the flora and the leakiness before somebody gets pregnant. And this is, again, as you said, if you want to get pregnant tomorrow, I fight with women. Say, give me 3 months. Yeah. It's not going to happen overnight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Datner. We have another question here at the front.
Hi, Paul Grewal. I'm a internist, allopathic, I suppose one would call it. It's a bit of a four-letter word around here. So I, forgive me if this turns into more of a comment than a question, but it's directed at Andrea. So I left hospital medicine a few months ago and started my own practice. And what I found is that when you talk about empathy, my kind of definition of empathy is that I suffer when I see somebody else suffer. And I think part of the traditional medical training and everything that you go through drives that out of you. because of the time pressures. And so, you know, I think it's really, and you know, I also had kind of my own health journey of being very overweight, and so being able to see that in somebody else, when I see another physician who's a string bean, and forgive Dr. Morrison, you're very lithe.
I'm trying to put on weight.
But when I see them preach to a patient or label them as non-compliant, I think it's far and away the worst thing a doctor could ever do in terms of dismissing a patient, because, you know, their hormones are screwed up. They're insulin resistant, even if they wanted to eat. And you know, I was driven out of my hospital system for instituting a low carbohydrate diet for metabolic syndrome patients. You know, like, this is not the ADA recommendation. Sorry, you can't keep doing this. And I had patients come into my clinic where it was high fives 3 months later instead of let's go through your med list again. Right. And so, you know, I think it's the whole kind of functional sort of paradigm, I think, has to stay focused on empathy above everything else, because that is what differentiates it. And it also allows you to get that connection with the patient to drive behavior change.
And trust.
Yes.
Because the behavior change is going to come from trust. And I think I really appreciate what you're saying. And also, I think a lot of practitioners are fearful of empathy because of that barrier I was talking about with the queen and the guards. We need some protection for ourselves. So what I'm actually looking at are what are 3 stages that we can look at in empathy, and I'm looking at inquire and identify and integrate. So the inquiry is really asking the questions so we can be with the person and appreciate who they are. Identifying is seeing them, really, who is this that I'm working with? And how do we then integrate what we learn from those processes into our care? So there's a little bit of selfishness for me in the empathy. One is really to see the patient, but I feel like when we're in an empathetic state, not only is there oxytocin flowing and there's more trust in there for both of us in the therapeutic relationship, but we actually garner more information that's going to give us more clues. So instead of just jumping to the conclusion, when we develop that trust and that empathy, that's when the magic comes in, and if we're able to be in confidence and think on our feet, we get the answers that we need because they hold them all. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and I think in allopathic medicine there is a lot of fear of empathy because we don't want to take on their pain. So how do we practice in empathy without bombarding ourselves?
Quit your job at the hospital.
Gabe, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think with the empathy topic, a big part of it, it's not just about feeling each other's pain, it's about seeing each other as capable. So, you know, I think a lot of when you feel the pain someone's feeling and you feel the helplessness that they're feeling, I think you're moving away from empathy and more into a sympathy or more into this helplessness with them. When you feel their pain but also see them as capable, it really changes the position. So, you know, what's interesting is all the information, like what was just brought up. So here's this woman, she's had a child, she was toxic when she had the child, now she feels guilty for having done it. So, you know, and at the same time, there are people who haven't gotten pregnant yet who need to understand that this is an important factor of having a baby. So how do we educate those people, but then also let the people know who've already had kids that it's okay. Here's where your step is now. Because the most important thing is that we have a population of empowered people who feel like whatever it is that's on their plate now, they can take on. Whereas, you know, so much about learning about the mistakes we've made in the past just triggers old traumas of just all the mistakes we've made in the past and all the things we can't go back and change. And, you know, it can create a helpless feeling. So I think we have to balance, you know, educating the young woman who hasn't gotten pregnant yet with educating the mother who already has had a baby and letting her know it's okay too. And here's where your steps are and this person's steps are different. But that overall, everyone is capable of handling whatever it is they have. And I think that's, you know, a more well-rounded version of it.
I was going to end there, but Kelly B wants to say something in the front. What are you going to say?
No, I think it's such a relevant consideration because there's a shaming component, right? So I always invoke the Maya Angelou quote that I knew, you know, I did then what I knew how to do, and now that I know better, I do better. And it's essentially like a, you know, it's a forgiveness and compassionate sort of oriented posture you can adopt, while also saying, now you know, so do differently.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And
I just want to say thanks, Paul. Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. You're the most important person here in a certain way, because this whole Evolution of Medicine project was really designed to, really make it easy for people to sort of, understand that this is something that's necessary and valuable. And I really appreciate you coming today and being part of it. I do want to say, with regard, one thing that we did earlier this year that I think is going to come full circle. We interviewed Dr. Pamela Weibel for our podcast on the micropractice evolution. She, by all intents and purposes, and from whatever I've heard, absolutely crushed it at TED Med a few weeks ago. And I think when her talk comes out, but she was basically talking about the fact that medical school is an abusive relationship. And people come out of that abusive relationship doing things that they probably wouldn't do otherwise. Because, yeah, exactly. And I think that this is really getting to the core of what's going to happen. So that TED Med talk is going to come out. If you go back through our podcast and listen to her, I think she's a superstar in the making with that. I also want to mention, I know that there's a lot of amazing people in this room, and there's people at home listening. One thing that we're going to do in 2016, we're going to give everyone every opportunity, anyone who's in this community, anyone who watches, an opportunity to add their content to this show. We know that there are tons of doctors that are probably sitting at home going, oh, I wish I'd been able to say this or that. You're going to be able to say it, and we're going to put it on the show. We want to engage the power of the whole community all over the world. Anyone can make a video with their smartphone now, and that's going to be one of the things that we're going to do next year.
Thanks so much for watching, and for more great clips like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I've created a special free video just for you called Harnessing the Power of Community in Your Practice, and it'll give you a clinical model, practical tools that double as marketing, and strategies to develop a community of your peers. All you have to do is click on the link below.